The story of Moses and the Exodus from Egypt has been told thousands of times. It is a reminder to the Jewish people that once we were slaves, but now we are free. And so this year, as in years before, we tell the story of Passover. We begin in Pharaoh's palace.
Yes, I'll have more grapes. I've had an exhausting morning walking around touring all of my massive pyramids, and I am tired.
Us slaves are doing a really good job of building your pyramids. My 14 sons are having big muscles because they're carrying your bricks to the places that pyramids are building.
You have 14 sons?
Indeed I do, your fabulousness.
Be gone! I need to think. This could be bad, really bad. I mean, I love having these Hebrew slaves, but there are just so many of them. They are not Egyptians, and as shocking as it might be, I don't think they even like me. What if there's a war and they join my enemies and fight against me? I am going to try to find a way to decrease this Jewish Hebrew slave population.
Hear ye, it is hereby decreed by Pharaoh, ruler of the land of Egypt, that any son born to a Jew will be drowned in the Sea of Reeds.
No! Our story continues on the banks of the Nile River, where we meet a Jewish woman with a newborn son.
What was her name, Kayla?
Yocheved.
Oh no! Did you hear about Pharaoh's awful decree? I mean, I knew he was mean, but now he's killing our babies. I have to hide my beautiful baby boy.
So Yocheved, oh my gosh, wove a basket of reeds, which is another word for long bamboo-like sticks, put her son into it, and hid in the tall grass by the river. Then she sent her young daughter, Miriam, to hide nearby and keep watch. Pharaoh's daughter, who was a princess, eventually came down to the water to bathe and heard cries coming from the river.
What is this? A beautiful baby boy?
She pulled the baby out of the water.
Oh, you're such a precious little baby. Oh, I bet you are one of those Jewish babies that my father, the Pharaoh, is trying to kill. But you're so cute and you're so innocent. I know. I think I am going to raise you as my son. Okay.
Excuse me, Your Highness. Would you like me to call a Jewish Hebrew woman to take care of your son? Because babies poop a lot and princesses don't like poop.
Oh, that's true. I hadn't thought of that. Well, yes, you will go and find me a Hebrew woman to raise him until he can walk. But then you give him back to me, and I will raise him as my son. I will name him Moses, drawn from the water.
And so Yocheved's son, Moses, grew up as the Pharaoh's adopted grandson, with all the riches and prestige that such a position entailed. But when he was young, Yocheved told Moses that he was Jewish, so he always had great compassion for the Jewish slaves.
One day he came upon a Egyptian guard beating a old Jewish slave. Moses got so mad he killed the guard.
Of course, by doing so, he was breaking the law. He feared the consequences, so he ran away from the palace into the desert and became a shepherd. That's where we pick up the story now.
One morning, Moses was following his sheep. One fine morning, as Moses was following his sheep, he came across a burning bush. It was the craziest thing. This green bush was on fire, but instead of burning up and getting all crinkled and then black, it stayed green. This was, of course, a miracle. It was God getting Moses' attention so he could talk to him. It worked.
Moses, Moses!
Here I am.
I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. I have seen the affliction of my people in Egypt and have heard their cry. I have come to deliver them out of the hands of the Egyptians and to bring them out of that place onto a good land, flowing with milk and honey, Now, Moses, I need you to go back to Pharaoh and tell him to let the Jews go free, and then you will need to lead the Jews out of Egypt.
It is important to know that Moses stuttered whenever he spoke, so he was always nervous to speak in public.
But why should why should I be the one to lead my people?
Fear not, I will be with you.
What should I tell the people?
Just tell the children of Israel, also known as the Jews, also known as the slaves, that they need to listen to you because you speak for me. Tell them to leave their homes and everything they have always known and follow you to the wilderness.
That's crazy. They'll never listen. And besides, I am slow of speech and slow of tongue.
You're right. It will not be easy. I forgot to mention Pharaoh is not going to simply agree to let his slaves go free. He will take some convincing, and it will not be pretty.
Please send somebody else.
Your brother Aaron speaks well, right? He will have to help. I will only speak to you, but you can tell Aaron what I said, and he can be the one who speaks to Pharaoh and the people.
And so Moses and Aaron went to the people in Israel and convinced them that God had spoken to Moses. Then they went to see Pharaoh and at the palace.
In the name of our all-powerful and all-knowing God, Pharaoh, we demand you to release the Hebrew slaves from bondage.
Ha ha ha. Moses, after all these years, you're back to bring disgrace and dishonor to our family.
Once my brother loved you as a grandfather, but he is the son of a Hebrew slave. If you really love him, let his people go. Also, if you do not let his people go, Egypt will be smitten with the greatest plague it has ever seen before.
Who's this God you speak of? I know nothing of him. He means nothing to me. Be gone.
To punish Pharaoh for his refusal to let the Jews go, God turned the water of the Nile to blood. It was horrible. Everyone needs fresh water to live. And instead of water, the entire river ran red with blood. Pharaoh was furious, and he called Moses and Aaron back to his palace.
It's horrible. The river Nile runs red with blood. How can we stop this?
The only way to stop it is for us to go free. We don't want to hurt anybody.
Then be gone. You're free.
So Aaron and Moses left the palace and told the Jewish people to start getting ready for their journey. But then...
Aaron, Moses, come back.
Yes, Your Highness, we were just getting ready to leave.
I have hardened my heart. You are no longer free. Who will build my pyramids? Who will build my city?
But Pharaoh, more terrible things will happen to the Egyptian people if you don't let us go.
I will take my chances.
Soon, Egypt was overrun with another one of God's plagues. This time, frogs. Ah! Wherever you looked, there were frogs all over the land. There, as you can imagine, it was awful. So Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron back to the palace and told them he would now allow the Jews to leave Egypt. But when they were ready to leave, Pharaoh changed his mind again. This happened every time. The next plague God sent was lice, and people and animals got all itchy. Then there were flies everywhere, and then cattle disease. So all the cows got sick and died. And boils, terrible blisters on everyone. Then hail, fell from the sky, some as big as ping pong balls, then locusts, which ate the plants, including all of the crops. So, between the cattle disease, which ruined the meat, and the hail and the locusts, which wrecked the crops, Egypt was in bad shape. People were hungry. Then came the plague of darkness. The sun never rose, and the people were frightened and cold. The plagues were spreading fear and sickness across Egypt. But the crazy thing was, after each plague, Pharaoh would call Moses and Aaron to the palace and tell them that if their God made the plague stop, the Jews could leave Egypt. So God would end the plague, then Pharaoh would harden his heart and change his mind, keeping the Jews in bondage. It was a mess.
Who is this God of yours? How is it that all these plagues affect the Egyptians but not the Hebrews? Be gone!
Pharaoh, our God is all powerful. We don't know what you can do to make you give in. We're warning you now that God has told Moses what the next plague will be. He's going to kill the firstborn of every Egyptian household, including your youngest son. Don't let this happen. Let my people go!
I do not know your God. I will not let your people go. Get out!
God came to Moses and instructed him to have all the Jewish people slay a lamb and smear some of its blood on the doorposts of their house. Then when the angel of death flew over Egypt, he took the lives of all the firstborn, except for those in the homes marked with blood. Pharaoh's own son died. It was devastating. The people of Egypt were mourning. Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh yet again.
Pharaoh, the grandfather that my brother once loved, we are truly sorry for your loss.
Go away. Leave me to grieve.
Now that you've seen how powerful our God is, will you let us go?
Take your people and leave. You've ruined my city.
So Aaron and Moses left Pharaoh and went to the Jews.
Listen to me, everyone. Remember today as the day that we will be able to leave Egypt. Once we were slaves, and now we are free, and God will lead us to the promised land.
We must go fast. We must make food. But we must go before Pharaoh changes his mind again.
He won't change his mind. Not this time.
Moses, if we leave right now, the bread won't have time to rise. Forget the bread. Let's go.
Most of the Jews went with Moses and Aaron, but some felt the whole idea of leaving their homes was crazy, so they stayed in Egypt. But meanwhile...
I've let all of my slaves go. Who will build my city? My economy will be in ruins, and I've disgraced my forefathers. I must have them back!
So once again, Pharaoh had hardened his heart. He got his army together and went after the Jews. Because they were walking and had lots of kids with them who were slow walkers, the Jews had only gotten a few miles away from Egypt, and they were really close to the Red Sea.
Look, the Egyptians are coming. They will kill us all. Moses, do something.
Don't be afraid. God has handled things for us before. I don't think he would make all of those plagues just for us to die at the edge of the Red Sea.
And God spoke to Moses.
Moses, lift thy rod and stretch out thy hand over the sea and divide it, and the children of Israel shall go across the sea safely.
It was amazing. When Moses raised his rod, the water of the sea parted, and the children of Israel walked across on the ground at the bottom of the sea. They were totally fine. But when Pharaoh's armies followed to catch them, the waters closed in, and Pharaoh's armies were drowned.
That was a miracle. We made it across the Red Sea. I don't know what God has in store for us next. At last, we are free. Woo!
And Miriam took her timbrel, which is a super fancy word for tambourine, in her hand, and all of the women joined her and followed her as she sang.
And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song.
This kicked off a trek of 40 years through the desert. It was also when God started sending manna, food from the sky that tasted like anything you wanted it to, and sustained the Jews until they reached the Holy Land of Israel. But all of that is for another story. In the meantime,
meantime, happy